Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. It's so nice to have you with us here on kind of an overcast summery day in West Virginia, where we're coming to you from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. Quartet is a program where every 2 weeks, four of us get together and take a really deep dive into some subject that is central to, critical to, informative of this amazing kind of transition that we're all experiencing and that is accelerating as we go forward in the coming months. I'm joined by Frank Jacob. Hi, Frank. How are you, my friend?
How you doing, John? Good to be here. Yeah, for me, the sun is going down obviously on this end of the world, and but it's been a nice time. It's been a quiet time, and I've been very busy actually, and going
Yeah,
through some interesting, personal things like personal health issues. But I've gotten through them, and I'm better for it on the other side.
that's
Uh,
great. Thank you. And Gregg Braden. Hello, Greg.
and I am once again coming to you from our little studio in Santa Fe. Frank, my brother, I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope you feel as good as you look on the outside because you look awesome.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, and I'm excited about this conversation today, John. So thanks for making it possible.
Yeah, we're going to have a very interesting conversation about why in the world would aliens or extraterrestrials want to live on this planet? And we're very sorry that our friend and regular participant, Penny Kelly, is not with us. Penny's had a tragedy in her family, and we send her our love and our prayers. She'll be back
Yeah.
with us in 2 weeks for sure. So let's go around the table and catch up and say what you've been thinking about. So, Greg, what's been on your mind?
Well, I had a list of things here on my mind. Of course, everybody's watching the Epstein saga as it unfolds, and it has many tentacles that are implicating many facets of the way the world works. We could spend a whole program talking about that. I am, I'm less concerned about, of course, what Epstein was doing was apparently was horrible, but the implications of a power structure behind him that have the ability to silence leaders of nations and entire intelligence organizations, I think is very concerning. And as concerned as I am about that, I also know that it has been a diversion, a distraction. There's a lot of other things going on. Everybody's looking at this. One that, and I literally have heard nothing in any of the mainstream news about this. July 1st, uh, gold was moved globally from a tier three to a tier one asset in the international banking system. The implications of that are huge. It means that all the banks now are required to have gold as part of their on their balance sheets at 100% of the price, the spot price, rather than the $42.50 an ounce that has been the price since Bretton Woods. And the implications for that in our economic system are, I think, we're going to be seeing throughout throughout the rest of the summer for sure. Um, we could have a whole conversation on that. And then the third one that I have seen a little bit on is that there are rumblings of the new COVID, and that has shown up in China. It's a very virulent strain of COVID. They've detected it in 5 U.S. cities. I think we mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. Moderna has just received approval from the United States FDA for a new mRNA Moderna COVID vax for children between the ages of 6 months and 11 years. And you have to ask, why would children between 6 months and 11 years need this when their bodies, especially if they're breastfeeding, lactoferrin in mother's breast milk is actually nature's way. It is SARS-CoV-2 specific. We already have it's antiviral. We already have the antibody in mother's breast milk. And I realize not everybody is breastfeeding, but the immune system of our young people is very vulnerable, very fragile. And I think it's very concerning that the FDA has proposed or approved this for such a young age. And I'm hesitating because there's a lot I want to say about it, and then I know we're just doing the highlights here, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Frank. What's on your mind?
Well, what Greg's talking about there with Epstein is, it's funny in our pre-show chat I was talking about how I've been running kind of two parallel tracks. On the one hand, of course, dealing with this esoteric stuff, and on the other hand, I've been asked to produce some athletes' portrait for the Olympic Channel. So you enter a totally different world, and you realize that there really are these two worlds out there. There's these people that are completely in the normie world, as we call it, all due respect, that have they're just not connected at all to this stuff. Like the producer of the series and I were talking. We never talk about any of these topics, and for me, it's actually refreshing to be producing films on such light topics because really it's like it is so heavy out there with the Epstein thing. Isn't that the ultimate gaslighting? Right? It's like, we've always known that the elites kind of like look down upon the rest of the world. And this is like the ultimate form of, like just looking at us as being like dumb as bricks, because hey, anybody that buys that line and just oh, really? Oh, okay. I mean, what are they thinking, right? But I think you hit the nail on the head, Greg, when you said it's a diversion. Like these kinds of events for years and years, for decades. One of the first things I learned about was that whenever you see this kind of a mass kind of event out there that attacks the emotions, then something else is operating in the background. And we know that those things are, yes, there are these new strains. Another thing that I caught in the media was how they're noticing that so that there's these drugs for like abortion pills, right? For women, and they take them and they literally flush their these miniature little humans into the sewage system. I mean, it's just unbelievable. What a picture, right? And I'm sorry to have mentioned it here, but what happens is that they're saying that even the water purification systems can't remove these elements, this chemical substance. So people are drinking literally water which is suppressing the human ability to be fertile. And we're wondering, why the fertility rates in the Western world are dropping so radically. And then there's the other issues I think I talked about it at one of the last shows. There was this attack in Russia by the Ukraine, with drones on their base, and there was this big talk from Putin about there is going to be retribution, right? So I was wondering what that retribution was going to be, and as now weeks have passed, there hasn't been any retribution. So it's kind of a confirmation to me that these talks of war and impending war and things often are more like smoke screens to keep us in fear. Because when we're in fear, we're not thinking correctly. We're just in a reactive state. And one thing we're not doing is we're not building a healthy and happy society, but we're working on trying to react to crises that are artificial. For the most part, they're created by a small group of people. So those are some of the things that I've been noticing.
It's time for our topic. Last time we got together here in Quartet, Penny Kelly made an interesting kind of comment in passing and said that human beings in the future are going to need to get used to the idea of living with extraterrestrials among us here on Earth. And that raised the question to me, uh, what in the world? Why would they want to live here? Uh, because I don't think that it's obvious why extraterrestrials would want to live here and what the objective of the whole thing was. I mean, it's a little bit like being told in current terms that we're going to send a bunch of refugees from North Africa into your town, and uh, uh, you're going to have to learn how to live with them. And the question again is, well, why would you want to break up the cohesiveness of a present kind of community and a system and a culture to bring in other folks who are of a clearly different kind of perspective? Are they interested in our well-being? Are they not interested in our well-being? Is it some kind of an attempt to uh, kind of infiltrate and subvert us? Penny would maybe suggest that there's some elements of that involved. I'm really sorry she's not here because this is really her topic, but we'll soldier on here and see what we can generate out of this. So, Greg, what do you think?
Well, I was muted because I thought you were going to go to Frank first. You know, John, I'm beginning to tell when we come up on your screen, you're looking at a big screen and your eyes will move to different parts of the screen, and I know which part I am. So, so
Well,
I wish Penny were here as well, and I would love to hear her. You know, I think we all sense what some of her insights are, but I'd love to hear the specifics. The question, it assumes that they're not here already.
uh,
And that assumption, there's a compelling body of evidence to suggest that they are already here. They being forms of life that did not necessarily originate in our Earth sphere, yet have a relationship here. And if we are to believe our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, as well as historic records that have nothing to do with spirituality, have nothing to do with religion, there are parallels in those accounts. And what those parallels say is that there are multiple competing factions of intelligent life from beyond this world that have multiple competing agendas when it comes to Earth as a planet and when it comes to us as inhabitants of the planet. And we don't have to look far to see where those are because now the new translations, new interpretations of the Bible are an example of one faction of multiple beings called Elohim. When the 1611, when the first version of the King James Bible was released to the public, the translators took a lot of liberties in those translations, and they translated the word Elohim, for example, which is a represents a plural to the singular of God. And so, if you rely only upon the King James version, you're looking at one all-powerful, intelligent being. Prior to that, there were multiple intelligences, and they were competing. In the case of Genesis, it's the story of two competing factions uh, that have very different ideas about how to empower the human that they have created. So, how much of the DNA is what we would say today is allowed to be functional? And there were two competing factions of that. Interestingly, we go to the Sumerian texts and we go to the Babylonian, Enuma Elish is the Babylonian creation story, exactly the same story. What's interesting about the Sumerian text is we start to see dates. So there is an artifact I've spoken about extensively on my channel, Gaia TV, a lot of interviews, that is called the Sumerian Kings List. It is a really, it's first, it's a beautiful artifact. It's a prism. It's not a tablet, but it's a four-sided prism. And it lists the rulers of the ancient Mesopotamian area where these factions first came. And it begins with a statement. It said, when the kingship descended to earth, suggesting that the kingship was in a realm that is not here. And it gives a list of all of the rulers for a period of time, 241,200 years before the Great Flood. Now, this is an interesting time period because we modern humans showed up during that time. We showed up about between 200 and now some are saying maybe even 300,000 years ago, but right around that 200,000 year mark. And they describe the uh, I'm hesitating. I don't know how deep to go with this, but they describe the creation of a human, the first human, and they also describe the disagreement between two factions in terms of how much power to give to the human, how much agency we are allowed to have. Now, there's another, the Enuma Elish is the creation story of the Babylonian creation story, where it actually says that they sacrificed one of their own to take elements of that body to create the first human. And if anyone has ever seen the movie Prometheus, Roland Emmerich, I think, was inspired by that creation story, and that's the way that movie begins, is with the sacrifice of an advanced being. His ship leaves him, and he's standing there, and he drinks a potion, disintegrates his body, and his DNA is fed into the ecosystem of the earth. And so that's where that comes from. So this is one faction, and they're very clear that we are made in the image, that because we embody the DNA and the blood and the bone, if we're to believe the texts. So it's reasonable to assume that those ETs, if we want to call them that, they look like us, we look like them because we're modeled after them. There are other accounts of other factions that don't really care about humans and would prefer that we are not here, uh, and that they are very interested in the resources of our planet, the rare resources that we have. Some of them are mineral resources, some of them are environmental resources. And where this gets really interesting is, again, we're assuming they're not already here. I believe that they are here. And we've said that this question does not come about in a vacuum. There's a bigger picture. And I've stated publicly, and I believe there's a compelling body of evidence, John and Frank, to suggest that Earth is being prepared for an occupation. Now, one of the questions that we had today was whether or not that's an invasion. I think the difference between the occupation and the invasion is going to be how we choose to relate to what is happening. But the climate right now, our climate is being engineered to, if we achieve all of the goals, to a Pleistocene era, geologic era climate of near extinction level CO2. They want our CO2 at 216 parts per million, 180, 36 points lower is extinction level. They want our planet 10 degrees cooler as a global average from 56 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Neither one of those are good for humans. Our power structures are being encouraged to go to war, to deplete our resources, to deplete our ability to defend ourselves as those resources are expended in those meaningless wars that are happening. And the movement to replace our bodies with technology that depletes our agency. It depletes our ability to be sovereign beings. None of those things I've listed, and others, there are others I could go on. None of those are good for us. None of those are good for humans. And you have to ask, if they're not good for us, who is it good for? Who would benefit from Earth being at a level of an environmental level that it was in the Pleistocene? And the answer is it would be forms of life who come from lower CO2 environments and cooler temperatures, as suggested was here in those ancient texts. So we talk about why would they want to be here? Maybe the question is, why are they returning? And the text suggests that that is precisely what happens, that they do return on a cyclic basis every 3,600 years or so, depending on which tradition you're looking at, and that there are advanced members that are already here that are guiding the preparation of our planet to make it easier for them in mass when they return. So those advanced preppers that are here presumably are guiding the policies that are not good for us right now, guiding those climate policies, guiding those conflict policies, the deterioration of our society, the breaking of social bonds, uh, the transhuman movement, all of these things that look like they're just popping off randomly are actually, when you look at the big picture, they are aspects of a system that is in place. There's a process as a beginning, as an end, we're in it. And I think it depends, once again, on which faction. There are factions, I believe, that care for us, and there are factions that are very self-serving. And we're dealing with all of them right now. And I think what it comes back to, John and Frank, I think it comes back, the better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to embrace this reality. And I'm going to admit right off the bat, I know it's a very different way of thinking for a lot of people. It sounds crazy for some people, but you look at the world, we live in a pretty crazy world right now. I acknowledge it's a different way of thinking, but I think the better we know ourselves, it is us. We are the prize. And this is what I've said at our transition events and others. There is something about us that is so rare and so precious that those forms of life aspire to because we were given components of multiple forms of life pooled into this unique body that apparently does not happen a lot in other realms. So we are the prize, and this is the reason they haven't eliminated us altogether and just taken over the planet because we are part of the package. So the reasons are genetic reasons, environmental reasons, historic reasons, and if we look at this as part of the continuity of a timeline rather than as a one-off event, I think it begins to make a lot more sense, and it helps to inform us, I think, to make healthy choices and good decisions when it comes for ourselves and our families and the future of our planet. So I rambled on a little bit longer because Penny's not with us, and I'm going to stop right there, John.
Thank you very much. There's a lot to be said there. We'll come back to it here in a minute. Frank, what do you think?
Why would extraterrestrials want to live here? It's a good question. I'm not sure I totally trust what those kings had their scribes put on those tablets way back then, Greg. I'll just put that out front. Um, I'm not here to say that extraterrestrials haven't come to Earth or that they couldn't, or maybe they have. Maybe some are here now. Maybe they've always been. Um, there's a long mythological and modern tradition of lights in the sky, visitors, contact, even inner Earth beings, and I respect that. But I think people often blankly accept that ETs are out there and will be coming here without too much scrutiny. So I'm looking at things a little differently, and I'll just put this perspective as a contrast out there so we can kind of discuss it. I'm exposed to the idea of ETs living among us already, or soon to be, or hybrids, quite a lot actually, because my own curiosity led me to make feature documentaries about it, which and so I'm not a stranger to it. If anything, I'm totally open to it, and I'm surrounded by believers. However, after all I've seen and experienced so far, I'm not necessarily buying most of the narratives that are out there. So I'll bring in a layer that's maybe missing sometimes in the conversation. Just because a being arrives or appears doesn't mean it can actually live here. Earth isn't just a neutral backdrop. Like, I'm personally convinced that the Earth is actually a living being, not just a habitable zone, not just a rock with water and the right temperature band, right? So the ancient Gnostics, they called her Sophia, a living planetary body of a divine aeon who actually came from the cosmos, turned into the Earth, and birthed all of life. And so, like any living system, if we're to accept that, then she'd have filters, barriers of entry, conditions for resonance, maybe even an immune response. Um, and if we step away from mythology and just look at biology, for example, like, what would it actually mean for an extraterrestrial life form to physically live here? Every organism on this planet is tuned to Earth's unique frequency profile. We're not just adapted here, like, we're entrained in this environment. 8 hertz. It's not just an atmospheric background noise. It entrains our human brain waves. It governs our circadian rhythms. Um, it even synchronizes cellular regeneration. And then you look at our atmosphere, 21% oxygen. Specific ratios of nitrogen and trace gases. This could be toxic to any other alien biology, right? So, and our gravity determines everything from our skeletal structure to our organ function. We have an ionosphere charge, and the whole spin of the planet, generates a living electromagnetic cradle that humans and all earthborn life are woven directly into. And then basically would mean for a being from another star system it wouldn't just be simply landing here and walking among us, because it's not really just possible to, I think, transplant from a place that's completely different and enter into this biosphere. Actually, it's biologically and electrically implausible, unless their world, of course, mirrors ours almost exactly. And statistically, I think we can all agree that's highly unlikely. So every creature that wants to participate on this planet becomes a physical embodiment of matter within this dimensional field. And humans are tuned perfectly to this planetary system, not by accident, but by design, right? So this anthropos, as the Gnostics call it, it's not just native to Earth, but it's in harmony with Earth. It's part of a whole system. It's a whole being. And all of this means that if you weren't born on this frequency field, then it's not easy to just step in, function, and thrive, like it's something that it's not just to be lived on, but it's actually to be lived within our world, right? And I know people often say that higher dimensional beings are less dense and you know but have we actually really seen any of these beings participate directly in this experiment over the long term? These could just be abstract ideas that symbolize something in us, a longing for finer sensibilities. Only on Earth is where it actually matters, right? In other words, matter is where everything counts. You can't move much physically from the astral plane. So while I'm totally open to the idea of non-Earth intelligences, I think we need to ask, are these visitors actually embodied here, or are they interfacing through some craft, or through simulations, or altered states, or proxy agents? You addressed that a little bit, Greg, like, that there's a takeover going on here. And what you're describing to me speaks totally to this idea of the archontic intrusion, this idea that archons can't live here, but they can manipulate humanity. They can, and there actually is evidence of that in the Nag Hammadi, that they entrain the dopamine circuits of the human brain so that, in a sense, they've actually got their little proxies here preparing the planet for something. Maybe it's even just making sure that it isn't good for us humans to be living here. So the question is, it remains, can they really stay here? Can they resonate? Or are they only skimming the surface? You don't just show up here, start farming DNA and building settlements. It's more complicated. And those that don't resonate with Earth's frequencies, they can't really embody what it really means to be on Earth and to be in an earthly life. And if you're going to live within that field, not just observe it or manipulate it, but truly inhabit this planet, then you need to be in tune with those organic rhythms of the Earth, as far as I'm concerned. So when we ask why a non-terrestrial intelligence, would want to live here, we must actually first ask, I think, can they or should they? Are they even capable of entering into this experiment without disrupting it? And another thing that I think of sometimes is I ask myself, whether this concept of the extraterrestrials isn't just some kind of misidentification of beings that are distortions within the Earth's dreaming field, like egregores, or could claiming an identity like being an Arcturian or a Syrian or an Andromedan or a Rigelian not just be a metaphor for homesickness coupled with human imagination, right? So for not feeling in resonance with the current human experience, which by all indications, as we've been talking about, can be pretty hostile to people that are developing awakened sensibilities here. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the soul then is foreign. These are human, not alien sensibilities. And we can't rule out that it may simply be a remembering of a deeper galactic origin that we all share via the originator. So the other question would be like, would they want to live here? Perhaps many wouldn't, many couldn't, So those that try, they may not be living here at all, but just inhabiting surrogates, appearing through interface zones, like I already talked about, like subtly trying to hijack consciousness from the inside. But that really isn't, to me, a high quality of existence. And the last thing I would say is that, this addresses the negative impact of the ETs here. This is something more on a metaphysical level, because I think the physical tells us a story that none of them could really live here without some serious distortion unless they were perfectly matched, which I think is a pretty rare possibility. And this is something which again addresses the idea you were talking about, Greg, and which is in the Gnostic text about these archons, which are inorganic imposters. They simulate form, they mimic life, because they can't live here. And because they can't truly inhabitate this earthly realm, this Sophia's body, if you will, they're not an original intention. So they're piggybacking, and they're piggybacking through our technology, through our thoughts. But this is not true embodiment. So for me, the question of why are they an integral part, I think was another thing you said in your document. And the question, are they an integral part of our earthbound community? I would ask, are they integral? Like, or have we just been conditioned to believe that they're integral? So those are my 2 cents to it.
Yeah, those are all very interesting and provocative ideas. It occurs to me in thinking about this is that what the big try to see if you could distill down what the big objective might be in this kind of a situation. And on one case, you've got all this historical uh, information suggesting that we are being nurtured, we are being brought along, we have been seated here, that they have this uh, helpful, friendly orientation to try to help us get to where we're going. It's a little bit simplistic, but that's the basic idea. That says that this is a big deal, moving from one era to another one, and that part of the process of kind of seeding new cultures on different kind of planets, which apparently has been done many times, different places, always includes this kind of nurturing and consulting and advisory kind of role. Uh, and in any case, it'd be a kind of a hard truck going into the coming months and weeks and years to not believe that there's some kind of a force of some sort that is playing a positive role in this whole thing. That is there to help us, can be called upon, and so on. And of course, the literature, some of which Greg described generically, is all full of all these indicators saying that they're all out there and you need to just contact them. And you can do this on any number of levels, including the whole planet and your own personal situation and so on. On the other hand, you've got what I would, I guess, call the Penny Kelly scenario that's also been alluded to by Greg, and that is that there's a larger kind of conflict and objective in play here. That there are multiple groups that don't live on this planet that are interested in this uh, in the planet and in its denizens because of the unique things we bring to the table, to wit, our DNA. There is multiple sources, unconventional, of course, that all imply, suggest, describe that human beings are an amalgam, synthetic, a hybrid from uh, a number of different sources, but one of which is uh, some of the advanced uh, non-human forms that in fact seeded this planet. That in fact that there are certain kind of characteristics that we have, love, compassion, some other creativity that are not generally available across the galaxy, and that we have this unique kind of capability. It's always been said, there's these books like The Only Planet of Choice and so on that all imply that this planet is unique for whatever reasons. Maybe it's an experiment, uh, whatever, but it is unique, and that makes it then uh, putatively valuable because it's unique, and that uniqueness is tied up in the essence of who we are, our DNA. So it's an interesting kind of problem, a transitional problem, because a transition by definition is a movement from one state to another. It's a transition to a new world, in our case, a new human. And this new human is a new human, like really a new human, a different kind of person. They're different biologically, they're different kind of spiritually, if you will, certainly metaphysically, seeing the world in a different kind of way. And there seems to be a conflict in place in the middle here about whether this new human is going to be allowed to emerge. That there is, on one hand, a significant technocratic effort to essentially eliminate the human as it is, and it has as it has been, and which is a huge kind of big deal. And at the same time, there's this possibility of the emergence of a new human, biologically different, DNA different, great deal of capabilities that we don't have right yet. And so there is, it's a struggle. It seems to me it's an interesting struggle in the middle here, and I'm, I guess I'm with Penny and Greg a little bit to in believing that this there's something bigger here than what kind of meets the eye. It seems to be the case across the board, no matter what's going on these days. And as a matter of fact, that there is a major effort. Maybe it is a takeover effort. It certainly makes sense. And Penny would suggest that that's economic. That there's an economic element to that. That we're located at a place in the galaxy that makes it particularly advantageous to harvest what we've got, whatever that might be. And so um, if you kind of circle back to the original question, the question is, why do they want to come here? Well, I think there's people on both sides of that equation. That there are some that are here to help us, and very much. And frankly, I don't think we've learned how to appropriately interface with and take advantage of them, and that there's a great deal of beneficial uh, resources that are there and available to us. And on the other hand, it's hard not to when you think of kind of the things that are on our political and kind of news plate today with all of the pedophilia and other kinds of things, that there are not at the same time others that are working very, very
Mm.
hard to keep this whole thing going in the direction that it has been going. Well, that's what makes this whole thing so interesting, because we're right on the verge of just an amazing kind of thing that is probably going to be enhanced by waves of energy from the center of the galaxy, and other such things. But this is it's I don't know that it's clear why aliens would be here. There could be there, and which is to say, it could be a number of reasons, and all of them could coexist at the same time. It could be just a new effort to do this, and so that's what I've been thinking about.
Well, gosh, there's so many things that
Yeah.
the thing is, it's clear to me that there are these cycles, and there's these cataclysmic cycles. We don't even know if the 200,000 year time span of this recent version of humanity is the only one. I mean, and the thing is, the other thing about a lot of the information coming about other planets or other beings that I have a problem with, not that I, want to discount it, but it's unfalsifiable, right? I mean, there's no way you can test it. And so for that, that's one of the reasons that I decided to go to source materials. And I realized that even what you were addressing, Greg, it makes total sense within that cosmology, just like you were describing with the Aldabaoth and that that this whole story. But what I discovered is that that story is something that belongs to something called Valentinian Gnosticism. And there's another form of Gnosticism which actually predates it, which is hardcore. It's Sethian. And it actually talks about Sophia having created the world. And this has sort of been, they were hounded and they were like literally wiped off the planet. And what survived out of their teachings had to morph into like it bridged itself into the Christian version, the Paulian system of belief, which then emerged like 2,000 years ago. So you have remnants of this story in this, Sethian Gnosticism, which survive, and others which are completely morphed. So that's why I always say I'm always cautious to just accept what was written or translated by kings or on tablets or with, I just know that we've had these long cycles and we see evidence of them on cave drawings. We see evidence on cave drawings that show that the environment around our planet was completely different. We know for a fact that the electromagnetic charge, on the planet was completely different at different times. And there's even talk, in Gnosticism of this being the ninth version, the 10th version of the Anthropos. Meaning, what did the other nine do? Did they did they habitate or colonize other planets in the Orion or in this arm of the galaxy? And we see remnants of those, and people are picking that up, in a certain way. We cannot discount the ability of humans to kind of tune into that field and bring that information. Maybe it's some obscure memory. We just always have to be very cautious about defining it and saying, this is it, this is the truth, because none of us really know. What we do know, to me, is clear, is that our planet is under attack right now by, as you mentioned, John, psychopathic leaders and infiltrated, into NGOs of all kinds, so that an agenda is being carried out that is undeniable, undisputable, anti-human. And, just the simple geophysical aspect of it and the biological aspect of it hints at an eradication of what we look at ourselves as right now as real humans who haven't even really reached their potential, their fullest. And I hear you talk about that a lot, Greg, that we haven't even reached this divine potential in us. We have this amazing stuff that we haven't even really realized, and yet we're already selling ourselves short, and we're moving into this artificial world, and that's why I believe, there's a split going on. There's going to be, I think, the majority of people are transfixed and mesmerized by the transhumanist agenda, and it seems to me likely that this is going to become one of the dominant factors on this planet moving forward into the future. However, I do believe there's going to be enclaves. This is I keep bringing this up, and this is one thing I want to talk. We won't have time to talk about it today, but I think this is a subject that I personally want to address with you guys, maybe in person or maybe sometime in the future, about what these enclaves symbolize. And I think there's going to be a dead end road for the AI transhumanist road, and it's going to die.
Yeah.
No, that's
No, this is
really
an important
good.
part of the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting stuff. We'll come back and visit it here again another time. But thank you both for another delightful conversation. Come and join us again here on Quartet. Thanks again. Be well.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Frank. Good to see you.
Thank
Thank
you,
everyone for
gentlemen. Always
tuning
a
in.
pleasure and an honor.